Chapter 1 Between Two Fires. Dawn came gray and reluctant over the Rays' ranch, and Caleb was already among the horses. He moved through the corral the way other men moved through prayer, slow and unhurried, one hand trailing along a warm flank. And when the big roan mare tossed her head and shied from the cold, he spoke to her low in a tongue that no other white man for 100 miles would have understood. "Steady, little sister," he murmured. "The morning will not hurt you." The words came from somewhere older than thought. They came from firelight and the smell of piñon smoke, from a woman's voice that had once said the same thing to a boy shaking with fever. The mare stilled. Her ears swiveled toward him and held, and Caleb felt the small victory of it settle into his chest, because there was precious little else out here that answered when he called. The ranch was failing. He knew it the way a man knows a wound is turning bad not all at once, but in the accumulation of small signs. The north fence sagging, the well going shallow. Fewer buyers each season, and those who came looking at him sidelong, taking his horses and leaving their trust behind. He had 30 head of good Mustang stock, broke gentle and true, and no market honest enough to want them from his hand. He fed and watered by the rising sun, and when the light finally spilled clean and gold across the yard, he saddled the roan and pointed her toward town, because a man could not eat pride, and there were nails and coffee and a sack of flour that would not buy themselves. Old Marta was on the porch of her small place as he passed, black-shawled and sharp-eyed, snapping beans into a tin bowl. She was the widow of the hand who had worked this land beside Caleb until the fever took him 2 winters back, and she was one of the few souls hereabouts who looked at Caleb and saw a man rather than a story. "You're going to town," she said. It was not a question. "Mind your temper, Caleb Rays. They're in a mood down there. Somebody's put paper up on the mercantile." "Paper about what?" "Water," Marta said, and spat a bean hull over the rail. "It's always water in the end." Town was a single dusty street pretending to be more, and Caleb felt the change in it the moment the roan's hooves struck the hardpack. Conversation dropped. A woman drew her boy in against her skirts. 2 men outside the smithy watched him pass with the flat, careful faces of people deciding whether to bother hating a thing. "That's the one," he heard, not quite under a breath, meant to carry. "The one the savages kept." Caleb did not turn his head. He had learned long ago that turning your head gave them the thing they wanted. He tied the roan at the mercantile rail and stepped up onto the boards, and there, tacked to the wall beside the door, was Marta's paper. Territorial Notice of Water Claim, it read, in the heavy black type of men who own printing presses. It went on in the language of survey lines and prior use and beneficial development, and Caleb read enough of it to understand the shape of the thing beneath the words. Someone was moving to claim the flow of the creek that ran down out of the hills, the creek that watered the Apache camp 2 days' ride to the west before it ever reached a settler's ditch. "Educated, are you?" The voice was smooth and unhurried, a voice accustomed to rooms going quiet when it spoke. Caleb turned. The man was broad through the shoulders and soft nowhere, dressed in a townsman's black coat that had never seen honest dust, and he wore the notice at his back like a banner. "Silas Crane," the man said, and did not offer his hand, which spared them both the lie of it. "I own the bar cross and most of what runs off these hills before long, and you'd be Rays, the horse man." His eyes went over Caleb the way a buyer looks at stock, pricing the teeth and the hocks. "They tell me you were raised out there, with them." "They tell you a lot, seems like." "They tell me you speak the tongue, ride like they do." Crane's smile did not reach anywhere near his eyes. "That could be worth money to a man like me, Rays, a man who could talk to them. Reason with them when the time comes for them to move along." He tapped the notice with one thick finger. "The territory's growing. Water's going to belong to the men bold enough to hold it. Be ashamed to stand on the wrong side of that." "And which side is that?" "The losing one." Crane settled his hat. "Think on it. A man's got to know where his people are." He went down the steps and swung up onto a horse worth more than Caleb's whole remuda, and rode off with 2 hard-faced riders falling in behind him who had the look of men paid for something other than herding cattle. A man's got to know where his people are. Caleb stood a long moment with the words sitting in him like a stone, because that was the whole trouble of his life said plainly by a man he already despised. His people. He had been maybe 6, maybe 7, when the sickness took the wagon he'd been born to and left him the only living thing among the dead. He remembered almost nothing of before: a woman's hair, the color of a certain cup, and everything of after. He remembered the riders coming down out of the rocks, and how he'd been too weak with hunger even to run. He remembered an old man dismounting, a man with a face like weathered stone and eyes that missed nothing, crouching in the dust to look at a dying white child that any sensible band would have left to the buzzards. Chief Dieta had not left him. Caleb had never learned exactly why, and had come to understand that some kindnesses do not require a reason, only a man large enough to give them. They had carried him back and put him by their fire, and a woman had spooned broth between his cracked lips and called him little sister's brother until he was strong enough to earn a truer name. He had grown up among them, learned the horses and the hunt and the long patience of the desert, and for a while the ache of belonging nowhere had gone quiet. Then the soldiers and the treaties and the shrinking of the world had made a white face a dangerous thing to keep, and Dieta, who loved him, had also loved his people enough to send Caleb back across the line into a world that had never wanted him either. For his own safety, they said, for everyone's. Caleb had ridden away from the only home he knew at 17, and he had been standing between two fires ever since, warmed by neither. He bought his flour and his nails. He did not linger. But he did not ride straight home. 2 days west, where the creek came singing down out of the Pinon Hills, was the Apache camp, and Caleb had 30 head of gentle horses and a notice pinned to a wall that concerned them more than they yet knew. So he pointed the roan toward the hills, and let the town fall away behind him, and felt something in his shoulders unknot with every mile. He smelled the camp before he saw its smoke and horses and the green of the creek, and then the lookouts were on the ridgeline, and one of them lifted a hand, and Caleb lifted his in return, and rode down into the one place on earth that had ever taken him in. They knew him. Children ran alongside the roan, calling a name that was his and not Caleb, and an old woman by a cook fire lifted her chin in grave welcome, and for a few bright minutes it was the homecoming he always let himself hope for and never quite believed in. Then a warrior stepped into his path, and the warmth went thin. Tahoma was Dieta's son, near Caleb's age, built lean and quick, and he wore his distrust openly, which Caleb had always half respected him for. "The white horse trader comes back," Tahoma said in their shared tongue. "Smelling of the town, what did you bring us this time, brother? Their sickness, their paper." "Horses," Caleb said evenly, "broke gentle. And word you'll want to hear, from a man in a black coat who means to take your water." "We have heard of the black coat man." Tahoma's eyes did not soften. "We do not need a white man to tell us when white men are coming. That we always know." "Tahoma," an older voice, dry as a river stone. Chief Dieta had come out from among the lodges, grayer than last season but no less upright, and the whole camp seemed to arrange itself quietly around him. He looked at Caleb a long moment, and something moved behind the stone of his face that was very close to gladness. "Let him get down off his horse before you fight him. He has ridden 2 days." And that would have been the whole of the reunion, warm and wary, the old shape of it, except that just then a commotion rose from the horse line at the camp's edge, and a young Mustang came up bucking and squealing against the rope, and a rider went with it. Not thrown, riding it. A woman, black hair whipping loose, low over the neck of a horse that had clearly decided to kill her, and she was laughing. Caleb had swung down without deciding, too. "That one'll go over backward," he said, moving. "She needs to give him his head before he—" "She knows what she needs," Dieta said mildly, not moving at all. The horse came down from its last great buck blowing and beaten, and the woman sat it easy as breathing, gentling it now with a hand and a voice, and only then did she turn and look at the stranger who had presumed to shout advice at her. She was perhaps 22 or 3, and her face was the kind that made a man forget the sentence he'd been building. "You," she said, and there was a challenge in it and something bright underneath. "The town-smelling one, you were going to tell me how to ride my own horse." "I was going to tell you how not to break your neck," Caleb said. "Seems I needn't have troubled myself." "Nay, Ellie," Dieta said with the particular weariness of a father. "My daughter, she was small when you left." "She is not small now." Nayeli slid down off the Mustang and handed the rope to a boy without looking, her eyes still on Caleb, measuring, amused. "So this is the one," she said. "The lost boy my father brought home and then gave away. You ride well enough for someone raised soft in a town." "I wasn't raised in a town." "No," she agreed. "But you left. That's the same thing in the end, isn't it?" She said it lightly, but it landed square, and Caleb found he had no answer that wasn't a wound. She smiled, not unkindly, seeing she'd struck home, and stepped past him toward the fire. "Come and eat, then, horse trader. Tell my father about your black coat man. And tomorrow, if you're not too tired from your soft ride, we'll see whether you can break the gray without any advice from me." "Tomorrow," Caleb said, and heard his own voice come out steadier than he felt. "I'll hold you to it." She laughed once low, and was gone into the smoke and the evening. Caleb stood there a moment too long. When he turned back, he found Chief Dieta watching him, watching the place where his daughter had been, and then Caleb's face, and then the both of them together in the space of one long, still look. The old man said nothing. He did not need to. His silence had weight, the way certain silences do, the weight of a man who has just seen something begin that he is not yet ready to allow. Then Dieta turned toward his lodge, and over his shoulder, dry as ever, he said only, "Get down off your horse, Caleb. You are home, for tonight." For tonight, Caleb led the roan toward the water and did not let himself hope for more than that. Not yet. Chapter 2, The Word of a Man. The mustangs came down out of the high draw at first light, 12 of them, dust and muscle, and the wet flint smell of horses that had never worn a rope. Caleb Reyes sat his gray at the mouth of the box canyon and counted them the way Chief Dieta had taught him to count a thing that mattered not by number, but by what each one carried. Good stock. The kind a man built a future on, if a man in his position had any right to say the word out loud. He heard the buggy before he saw it. Nobody drove a wagon into that country but a man who did not intend to sweat, and there was only one of those for 40 miles. Sila's crane pulled up on the road below the canyon and climbed down, a wide man gone soft in the middle and hard in the eye, dressed in a townsman's black coat that had no business in this heat, and worn anyway because the discomfort was the point. He looked at the mustangs the way another man might look at a woman across a saloon. "Rays," he tipped his hat back. "I hear those are the Willow Draw Band. I hear you're the only man fool enough to gather them." "You heard right on both counts," Caleb said, and did not get down. "I'll take the lot. Top dollar, cash, no haggling. I'm not a haggling man." Crane produced a folded sheaf of notes from inside the coat and held it up as though the paper were an argument. "You could stop being poor by supper." Caleb looked at the money and then at the man holding it. He knew what the mustangs were to Crane. He'd read the water rights notice pinned to the mercantile wall 3 days back, the surveyor's neat lines running a fence right across the creek that had fed the Apache herds since before any white man had a name for the place. A tribe without water lost its horses. A tribe without horses lost its legs, its trade, its way of feeding through a hard winter. Crane wasn't buying mustangs. He was buying the tribe's next season, one animal at a time. "They're spoken for," Caleb said. Crane's smile did not move, but something behind it did. He understood, and the soft face went still the way water goes still over a snag. "You mean to run them up to them?" He said the word the way a man spits a seed. "You'd hand good horse flesh to the savages before you'd sell to a white Christian offering you double what they're worth." "They're not worth double," Caleb said. "You're offering me money to help you starve people who fed me when I'd have died in a wash with the buzzards already circling. I was 8 years old and half a corpse, and a man you'd call a savage carried me 2 days on his back to keep me breathing." He gathered the gray's reins. "So no, not for double, not for 10 times. My word's already given, and a man that sells his words got nothing left to sell after." "A man's word," Crane repeated, finding it foolish. He folded the notes away with the care of a man putting a knife back in a drawer for later. "You're a sentimental fool, Rays. Sentiment's expensive. One day you'll add up what it cost you." He climbed back into the buggy. "Give my regards to your people, whichever ones those are this week." Caleb watched the buggy dwindle down the road, and only when it was gone did he let his shoulders drop. He turned the gray and started the mustangs toward the Apache camp, and did not look back at the money riding away. The camp lay in the crook of the river where the cottonwoods still held green, and the children saw him first, running alongside the herd shrieking and laughing until the knot Crane had tied in his chest began, slowly, to loosen. Nobody here called him the one the savages kept. Here he was simply the man who came back, which was its own kind of home. He found Naomi outside the healer's lodge, and he stopped where he stood. She knelt over a small boy laid out on a blanket, and she did not look up because whatever she did required all of her. The child's breathing came fast and shallow, a rasp Caleb knew. He'd heard it in foals, in old men, in a winter that had taken 3 of the band's elders when he was a boy. Lung fever. She had one hand flat on the boy's narrow chest, feeling the labor of it, and with the other crushed something between two stones into a horn cup of water gone cloudy and green. Her face held no fear at all. That was what Caleb could not stop watching, not her beauty, though she had that in a way that made a man forget his own name, but the absolute steadiness of her. "You'll frighten the horses standing there like a fence post," she said, still not looking up. "The horses like me fine. I raised half their grandsires." "Then sit down before you frighten me," a ghost of a smile. She tipped the cup and with a patience that had no bottom to it, coaxed the green water past the boy's cracked lips a little at a time, murmuring in the old tongue, words Caleb knew, "You are held, the breath will come back to you." The boy swallowed and swallowed again, and somewhere in the third or fourth the terrible fast rasp eased, one notch, then another, the small chest rising slower, deeper. Caleb let out a breath he had not known he was holding. "Willow bark and yellow root and a thing I won't tell you," Naomi said, sitting back on her heels at last. "You'd only try to sell it." "I don't sell everything." "No," she looked at him then, direct, the way she'd looked at him at the horse breaking when she'd outridden him and made him laugh in front of her whole family. "I've noticed that about you. It makes people trust you before they've decided to." They sat in the shade while the boy slept and his breathing evened, and neither of them filled the quiet. Caleb had learned long ago that the people did not fear silence the way white folk did. It was one of the first things he'd unlearned about the world he'd been born to. "They think it's easy for me," Naomi said at last, quiet, watching the sleeping child. "Being his daughter, they see the chief's girl and think she wants for nothing. But a chief's daughter is a thing before she is a person. Every young man who looks at me is measuring my father's regard, not my face. I healed a fever today, and by tonight the whole camp will say Dieta's daughter has strong medicine, as if it flowed down the line, and not out of 10 winters of my own 2 hands learning where I bled and where I failed." She set down the stone she'd been turning. "It is a lonely thing to be a symbol to your own people." Caleb thought about a boy carried 2 days on a man's back, and a grown man the town called by a name not his own. "I know a little about that," he said. "Yes," she said softly after a long moment. "I suppose you might." He would have said more. He never got the chance because Tahoma came at a run up from the river with mud to his knees and a fury that had nowhere yet to land. "The creek," he said, and then a stream of the old tongue too fast to fully catch, but Caleb caught enough. The morning water had come down to a trickle and then to nothing, and upstream they'd found new-turned earth, a channel cut, timber sunk, the whole creek shouldered off its course toward Crane's south range. Accidental, the surveyor would say. Everyone would know better, no one could prove it. Tahoma's eyes found Caleb, and the fury found its place. "You," he said in English now, so there would be no mistaking it. "You come with your white horses and your white money smell, and behind you the water dies. You want us to believe you're not his, you're all his." "He turned it down," Caleb said, standing slow, hands open. "Crane this morning. He offered me the price of a good year for these horses, so your herds would have nothing when the creek went dry. I told him no." He held Tahoma's stare. "I didn't know about the creek, I know now, and the man that cut it meant to be far off when you found it. He's in town, so am I going to be." That evening, Caleb rode into town and found Boone at the rail outside the saloon. Crane's captain was a lean, unhurried man, nothing wasted, no motion that wasn't a threat wearing the clothes of ease. He had 4 men and a toothpick and all the time in the world, and the boardwalk emptied by degrees around them. "Somebody cut the Willow Creek this morning." Caleb stopped 10 feet off in the middle of the street, where the light was and the witnesses were. "Sank timber turned the channel toward Crane's south range. That's Apache water by every treaty line there is." "Water runs downhill," Boone rolled the toothpick. "God's doing, not mine." "Taking it up with you. Whoever cut it did it clumsy and quick, like a man who wanted it done before daylight and didn't care who read the sign after." Caleb let his voice carry easy, so the men at the rail and the woman in the mercantile doorway all had it clean. "So hear me and let these good people hear me. That creek gets turned back, and if any harm comes to the people up on that river, a child, an old woman, one single horse, it won't be a treaty that answers you. It'll be me. I'll say it once, because my word's the only thing I never spend." Boone looked at him a long, flat moment, weighing it the way a professional weighs everything. He did not reach for the pistol at his hip, and Caleb did not reach for his, and everyone on that street understood a line had been drawn across the dirt that could not now be unseen. "Big words," Boone said finally, "for a man that belongs to nobody." He pushed off the rail. "Go home half and half, whichever home'll have you." And he went inside, and it was over, and it had not even begun. Caleb rode back out under a sky going bruise purple, and Dieta was waiting at the edge of the camp firelight, as though the old man had known the hour of his return the way he knew the weather. "You spoke for us today," Dieta said. "In the White Town." Loudly, so the words could not be taken back. "That was well done. But I am going to say a hard thing to you now, Caleb, the way I said hard things when you were a boy who wanted only to be one of us and could not understand why the wanting was not enough." Caleb waited. Trust among the people is not bought with one brave afternoon. It is grown in blood and in seasons the way that torn-eared mare grew her wisdom slowly at cost with scars to show for it. I saved your life once. That made you dear to me. It did not make you ours. The old eyes rose to Caleb's, kind and without any softness at all. "And I have seen how you look at my daughter and how she has begun to look at you. Naeli is not a bridge for you to walk across to a place where you belong. She is not the answer to your loneliness. If you go to her carrying that, you will break her, and I will let no man break her, not even the boy I carried on my back. Do you hear me?" "I hear you," Caleb said. His voice came out lower than he meant it. "Good." Dieta laid a hand on his shoulder, the whole of the boy's childhood in the weight of it. "Then go home and let it be true." He rode back to the ranch in the full dark, and he did not sleep. He lay on the rope bed in the little house at the edge of two worlds and made himself tell the truth in the one place there were no witnesses. He wanted her, not as a bridge, not as an answer. He wanted Naeli the way a man wants the one thing that finally makes the noise in him go quiet, her clear eyes, her bottomless patience, the steadiness of her hands over a dying child, the whole stubborn, proud all of her. And he counted, the way Dieta had taught him, not the number of the reasons, but the weight of them. Her father's warning, her brother's hate, his own cursed blood, a whole territory that would burn before it blessed such a thing. He wanted her, and he had never in his life wanted anything he had less right to. Outside, a horse stamped and blew, and Caleb lay awake and let the impossibility settle over him like the cold that comes down off the mountains after even the warmest day is done. Chapter 3. What the River Remembers. The creek had run longer than any man's memory, and now it did not run at all. Caleb Reyes crouched at the dry mouth of it where the water should have spilled onto Apache land, and he read the ground the way Dieta's people had taught him to read it, when he was a boy who did not yet know the world was divided. The stones here were pale and cracking. A week ago they had been dark and slick and alive. Upstream a quarter-mile, Crane's men had thrown up a berm of turned earth and river rock, and shunted the whole flow east into a settler ditch. And they had done it just far enough onto ground no one could rightly deed to claim they had done no wrong at all. "They dug it clever," Naeli said behind him. She had come down the bank without a sound, a coil of rawhide over one shoulder and a mattock in her hand. "My brother wants to go up there in the dark and open the man's throat instead of the ditch." "Your brother wants a lot of things," Caleb said. "He is not wrong to want them." She dropped the rope and looked at the ruined water. "Only wrong about which will cost us the tribe." They worked. There is a kind of labor that talks for two people who have not yet decided what to say to each other, and the reopening of the creek was that kind. They took the berm apart with their hands, and the mattock and a fallen cottonwood limb Caleb levered under the largest stones. It was cold work. Their arms went into the elbow and came out aching, and the summer sun did nothing to warm the wet. Naeli did not ask him to do the heavy lifting, and Caleb did not offer to spare her the wet. That was its own kind of understanding. Near noon the first stone gave that mattered, a flat gray shelf the size of a wagon seat, the keystone of the whole mean little wall. Caleb got his shoulder under the cottonwood limb and Naeli set her weight beside his, and for a moment their hands were both on the cold rock in the cold water, her brown fingers laid over his weathered ones, and the stone rolled, and the creek remembered what it was. It came through in a brown rush and then ran clear, and it was loud, and it filled the old bed the way a voice fills a house that has stood empty. They stood in it to the knees, and neither of them moved their hands off the rock, or off each other, for a breath longer than the work required. "There," Naeli said, and drew her hand back and looked at the water instead of at him. "There," Caleb agreed. They sat on the warm bank while the sun dried them and the creek talked below. She had brought jerked venison, and he hard bread from old Marta's kitchen, and they shared both without discussing it. "My mother used to say the river remembers everything," Naeli said after a while. Every animal that drank from it, every child born beside it, every promise a person made standing in it. She said that is why we do not speak lightly near running water. The water is a witness, and it does not forget, and one day it carries what it heard down to the sea and up into the sky and rains it out again on some other people, far away, who will never know whose promise wets their grass. That's a lot of weight for a creek to carry, Caleb said, but gently. You asked me once what the bond vow is. She had not looked at him. In town, when the boy was sick, and you thought I did not hear you ask my aunt, you wanted to know why my father watched us at the horse breaking and said nothing. Caleb was quiet. Downhill the water ran on. Among my people a man does not court a woman with cattle or with a name or with land the way your people do, Nayeli said. Those things can be taken back. A field can be sold. A herd can die in a hard winter. So he does not give her a thing that can be lost. He gives her a thing that cannot. He speaks the vow, the whole of it, aloud before the fire and before the people, and once it is spoken, it is spoken. There is no unsaying it. It is not a promise about the future. It is a claim upon it. He says, in front of everyone who could ever shame him for it, that this woman is the ground his life stands on, and that he will be answerable for her before the whole world until he dies. She finally turned her head. That is why my father watches. A man may want a woman a great deal and still not be a man who can say a thing that cannot be unsaid. Most cannot. It is easier to give cattle. And a white man has never said it, Caleb said. He had known it since he was a boy. But he wanted her to be the one to lay it on the ground between them. No white man has ever been given leave to, she said, which is not the same thing, but near enough. The word for it climbed up in Caleb's throat, and he held it there, behind his teeth, because a man does not speak a thing that cannot be unsaid on a creek bank with no one's leave to say it. He had a code, and the first line of it was that a man's word was the whole of him. You did not spend a word like that the way you'd spend a coin. So he said nothing, and Nayeli seemed to think better of him for the silence than she would have for any answer. Tahoma found them there. He came down off the ridge on his paint horse with 2 young men behind him, and he took in the running creek and the torn berm and his sister sitting close beside a white man on the warm sand, and his face did a thing Caleb had watched it do for weeks. He swung down before the horse had fully stopped. So, Tahoma said, the water runs again, and you sit in it like you dug the whole river and now own it. Tahoma, Nayeli said, rising. No, let him answer. Tahoma came down the bank. He was a head shorter than Caleb, and he did not care. You come to our fire and you eat our meat, and you look at my sister the way every one of them looks at everything we have. Land, water, horses. You think because my father pulled a half-dead boy out of a wash 20 years ago you are one of us. You are one of them wearing our patience like a borrowed coat. He shoved Caleb, both hands flat on his chest, hard enough to rock him. You want to take, say you do not want to take. Caleb did not brace and he did not swing. He let himself be rocked back a step, set his feet, and lowered his hands open at his sides. Hit me if it settles you, he said. I won't hit back. Coward. Maybe, Caleb's voice stayed level, but I won't give you the fight you want so you can go home and tell your father the white man raised his hand at the water. I know what I am, Tahoma. I'm a man your father made. If you break my nose, it'll still be your father's work standing here bleeding. He held the younger man's eyes. I'm not your enemy. Your enemy is upstream building walls. I'll stand next to you against him any day you like, but I'll not stand against you, not for anything. For a long moment Tahoma's fist stayed up. Then something behind his eyes shifted, not trust, not yet, but the first crack of doubt in a thing he'd been sure of, and he stepped back, breathing hard, said a word in Apache that meant nothing was finished, and swung back up onto his horse. He was still on the ridge, watching when the settlers came. They came off the north track slow, a farm wagon, a gaunt man walking at the oxen's heads because he hadn't the heart to make them carry his weight too. A woman on the seat with a baby, 2 children gray-faced in the bed. The man saw the Apache riders on the ridge and stopped dead and put his body between his family and the sight of them, which took a kind of courage, being unarmed. Water, he called out, hoarse. We've been 3 days on a dry barrel. I don't want trouble. I'll pay what I got. My young ones. His voice cracked and he did not finish it. Nayeli looked at the children in the wagon bed the way a healer looks, which is to say she saw how close they were before anyone else did. Tahoma, she said not loudly, but he heard her. What passed then was small and hard one, and it was the whole of what Caleb had been trying to build for weeks without a word for it. Tahoma did not want to. These were the people of the walls, the people of Crane, the endless gray tide that took and took. But Naomi said something to her brother in their own tongue, low and steady, and Caleb caught only the word for children in it, and Tahoma's jaw worked, and at last he jerked his chin. They watered the oxen at the creek Caleb, and Naomi had just set free. Naomi went to the wagon and put her hands on the smallest child and mixed something bitter in a cup, and the settler woman watched her with terror, and then with a dawning, wordless something near to shame. Caleb stood between the two peoples in the road, and did what he had learned he was for. He told the farmer where the honest water lay, and which land was spoken for and must not be crossed, and the man gripped his hand and called him friend, not knowing the word was a knife in this country. They went on before dusk, the children pinker, the barrel full. Tahoma watched them out of sight and said to no one, "One wagon." But he had let them water, and it was a beginning. The sun went down red over the mesas, and they were alone again on the bank, the creek running on in the failing light, the whole long day between them like a thing they had built together. "You did not hit my brother," she said. "No. You could have, he would have deserved it. That's not what deserving is for." She turned to him then, and the last light came sideways off the water and lit the side of her face, and Caleb forgot his code and every careful line of it. He laid the backs of his fingers against her cheek, and she let him and leaned the smallest measure into it, and her breath went unsteady, and the distance between them became a matter of an inch. Then she caught his wrist. "No," Naomi said, and he could hear what it cost her. "Not because I do not want to." She held his wrist against her face a moment longer, as if to prove the point, then set his hand away. "Because if we do this and it is taken from us, and Caleb, it can be taken. My father has not blessed it, the walls are going up, everything is against it. Then it will not be a small hurt we carry. It will be the running water kind, the kind that does not forget. I have seen what my mother's ghost does to my father on the nights he cannot sleep. I will not make that for us before there is any right to it." She stood quick before she could change her mind. "Let it be earned or let it be nothing. I could not bear it any other way." She left him at the creek. Caleb sat a long time in the dark and listened to the water carry the whole day away toward the sea, and did not know whether to curse her wisdom or love her the more for it, and settled, being the man he was, on both. 12 miles east, in the long, low ranch house he was building on stolen water, Silas Crane stood at his window with a glass of good whiskey and listened to Boone. "Rays was at the creek all day," Boone said. "Him and the chief's girl tore out the whole diversion with their bare hands. Word in town is he's thick with them, sleeps easier at their fire than his own, they say. Marta's boy heard him talking their tongue to his horses." Crane watched the light die over land. He intended to own to the last drop. "I thought he was a rancher who'd sell when the price was right," he said at last, mild as milk. "A man between two worlds, you can buy a man who belongs to nobody." He set the glass down. "But he's chosen. He's not a bridge anymore, Boone. He's a wall." He smiled, and it did not reach his eyes. "And I have gotten very good this season at walls." Chapter 4, 2 Worlds, 1 Fire. The fires were built high the night the camp gave thanks for the rains, and Caleb Rays stood at the edge of their light like a man who could not decide which side of it he belonged to. He knew this ceremony. He had known it as a boy, when Chief Dieta's people had pulled him half-drowned and orphaned from the world and made him one of their own. He knew the way the drums came in low, like a heartbeat found under the ribs of the earth, and he knew the songs that rose to meet them, songs of the water returned, of the grass that would follow, of the herds that would grow fat and the children who would not go hungry. His mouth remembered the words before his mind did. That was the strange grace of it. He could stand among the people who had raised him, and feel the old shapes of belonging fit over him like a shirt gone soft with wear. And still he was a guest, he felt that too. When the women danced the slow circle and the men stamped the answer to it, there was a place he did not step into, a rhythm he let pass him by, because it was not his to take. He had learned that much in the years between. A man could be loved and still be the pale face at the fire's edge. "You are not eating," Naomi said, coming up beside him with a bowl of stew still steaming from the pot. "I was listening." "You can do both." She pressed the bowl into his hands, and for a moment her fingers were over his, warm from the fire and the work of the day. She did not pull them back at once. That was new. 3 days ago, at the creek they had opened together with cold hands and colder water, she had pulled back and named the cost to them both. Tonight she let her fingers rest a breath longer than she needed to, and then she took them away, and neither of them said a word about it. "Your father honors the rains," Caleb said, because he had to say something. "My father honors what keeps us alive." Naomi watched the dancers, her chin lifted, firelight moving on the strong plane of her face. "The creek you helped open, the grass it will bring, he honors that too, though he would not say your name aloud in a thanks song." "I didn't do it for a song." "I know." She glanced at him sidelong, and there was that spark he had first seen at the horse breaking, the one that had gotten under his skin and had not left it since. "That is why I let you carry my bowl." Across the fire, Chief Diet arose. He did not raise his voice. He never did, but the drums fell away when he stood, and the singers let their song trail into the dark, and the whole of the camp turned to him as flowers turn without being told. Dieta was old now, and exacting as flint, and his eyes, when they found Caleb across the flames, were the eyes of a man weighing a stone in his hand before he set it into a wall. "Come to me, son of no father," Dieta said. It was the name the band had given the boy long ago. In another man's mouth it might have been cruel, in Dieta's it was only true. Caleb set down the bowl and went. The chief spoke low, so that only the near ones heard, and Tahoma, who came to stand at his father's shoulder with his arms crossed and his distrust worn open on his face like a wound he would not let close. "Raiders took horses from the north herd," Dieta said. 6 head, good horses, the ones Naomi gentled." A muscle moved in his jaw. "They were not Apache who took them. They wore white men's boots and left white men's tracks, and they drove the horses toward Crane's range." Caleb felt the cold of it settle in his gut. Boone. "I do not know the man's name, I know the tracks." Dieta's gaze did not waver. "I am sending Tahoma to bring the horses home. I am sending you with him." Tahoma's head came up sharp. "Father." "You will ride together," Dieta went on, as though his son had not spoken. "You will bring back what is ours. And you will do it without spilling settler blood, if blood can be helped, because if an Apache kills a white man over 6 horses, Crane will have his war, and it is a war we cannot win." He looked from one young man to the other, and the fire moved in the deep lines of his face. "I am asking you to be cunning where you would rather be fierce. Both of you. Can you do this thing?" "I can," Caleb said. Tahoma said nothing for a long moment. Then, stiffly, "I will not let my father's word be broken because a white man rides beside me." "Then we're agreed," Caleb said, "because I won't either." They rode out before dawn, when the fires had burned down to red eyes in the ash. For the first hours, Tahoma did not speak to him, and Caleb did not push it. He knew the shape of the man's anger. He had grown up in the middle of it, Tahoma, 3 winters older, who had watched a white child be loved as a brother, and had never once believed the world would let it stand. There was old grief in that anger, and Caleb had learned that you did not argue a man out of grief. You rode beside it until it got tired. The tracks led them across the flats and up into the broken country where Crane's range began. By mid-morning they had found the horses, penned in a box canyon with 2 of Boone's men set to watch them, careless, sure no Apache would dare come this far onto settler land. "We take them at dark," Tahoma murmured, flat on his belly beside Caleb at the canyon's rim. "Quiet." "I go for the guards." You go for the guards, and one of them shouts, and by sunup Crane's telling the whole territory the Apache came onto his land and cut a man's throat. Caleb kept his voice low and even. "There's another way. The pen's rope and green wood. We open it from the far side, drive the horses out at a run in the dark. 2 men can't stop 6 horses gone to panic. By the time they know what happened, we're gone, and there's not a drop of blood to point at your father." Tahoma turned his head. In the failing light his eyes were hard to read. "You would let them live, the men who steal from us." "I'd let your father keep his word. That's what he sent me for." Then Tahoma grunted, not agreement exactly, but the near cousin of it, and they settled in to wait for the dark. It went wrong, the way these things do. They had the pen open and the horses moving, a black flood of them pouring out into the night, when one of the guards came awake and up with his rifle, and he was not aiming at the horses. He was aiming at the shape that had risen from the rocks to slap them running, at Tahoma, caught for one heartbeat against the paler dark of the canyon wall. Caleb did not think. He never remembered after deciding. He came off the rocks and into the man, all his weight behind it, and drove the rifle wide as it went off so the shot cracked harmless into the sky, and the two of them went down together in the dust. The man was cursing, clawing, and he got a good look at Caleb's face in the muzzle flash of his own gun. "You," the man spat. "You're that rancher. Ray's the one that lives with the—" Caleb hit him once hard and the man went slack. Not dead, only stunned. He rolled off him and came up, and there was Tahoma mounted, one hand down, and Caleb took it and swung up behind, and they were gone into the dark after the running horses, and the last thing Caleb heard was the second guard shouting his name to the empty night. Rays did this. They did not stop until the flats, until the horses had run the panic out and slowed, and let the two men gather them into a loose, blowing herd under the low stars. Tahoma looked at him a long time across the backs of the horses. "He would have killed me," Tahoma said. "He would have tried. You put your body between his gun and me." Tahoma's voice had lost its edge. What was under it was harder for him to say, and Caleb had the grace not to make him say it. "And now he has your name. He will carry it to Crane, to the town. They will know a white man helped the Apache steal back from a white man's pen." "I know what they'll call me." Caleb looked out over the dark shapes of the Mustangs, the ones Nayeli had gentled, going home. "I've been called worse by people I cared about more." Tahoma almost smiled. It was gone before it finished, but Caleb saw it. "You ride better than I remembered, son of no father." "You're welcome, brother," Caleb said, and let the word land where it fell and did not look to see if it was taken. Nayeli was waiting at the edge of the camp when they came in with the horses at gray dawn, and it was her hands that reached first for the halter of the lead mare. Her face turned up to Caleb's in the thin light with something in it she was not troubling to hide. "You are not hurt," she said. It was not quite a question. "No. Tahoma. He'll tell it his own way." Caleb swung down, stiff from the long ride, and for a moment they stood close in the blue dark with the horses stamping and blowing around them and the camp not yet awake. "Nayeli." "Do not," she said softly. "I'm going to say it once and quiet so you can carry it or leave it as you please." He kept his voice low, meant only for her under the sound of the horses. "There's a whole world telling me what I'm not allowed to want, my blood, your father's law, the town that'll spit my name by noon today." He looked at her and all the banter was gone out of him and what was left was plain. "None of it changes the true thing. I want you, not as a bridge to your people, not to prove something to mine, just you. That's all, that's the whole of it." She was quiet a moment. The mare pushed its nose against her shoulder, and she steadied it without looking, her eyes on his face. "I know," she whispered, barely voiced, deeply felt. "I have known since the horsebreaking when you ate my dust and laughed at it." Her hand found his, hidden between them where no one waking would see. "It is not a small thing you ask. It could cost us both everything." "I know it." "Then do not say it again," she said, "until you can say it where my father can hear." But her fingers tightened over his before she let them go, and that was an answer too. By the time Caleb rode back to his own ranch, the sun was high and old Marta was waiting on his porch with her arms crossed and her mouth grim. "They're saying it in town already," she said before he was even down from the saddle. "That you rode with the Apache against Crane's men, that you struck a white man to protect a red one." Her weathered face was full of fear that was mostly for him. "Caleb, Crane's been buying whiskey and hiring guns since sunup, men drifting in off the trail with no cattle and cold eyes. He's gathering, and now he's got a reason folks'll swallow. Ray Strader, that's the word they're using. Let them use it. It'll get you killed." "Maybe." Caleb loosed the cinch and pulled the saddle down and stood a moment with his forehead against the warm neck of the horse. "But I did what Dieta asked, brought the horses home, kept the blood off the ground." He straightened. "That has to count for something." It did. 3 days later, when Caleb came again to the camp, Chief Dieta met him at the fire and looked at him a long time, and there was something in the old man's flinty eyes that had not been there before, a weighing come, for once, to rest. "You brought back what was ours," Dieta said, "and you did not break my word to do it. My son calls you brother now." "He does not say it to me, but I see it." The chief nodded, slow, granting it. "You did well, son of no father." Caleb waited because he knew Dieta and knew the shape of a sentence that was not finished. "But the hardest test," the old chief said, and his gaze went past Caleb, out to where the smoke of the settlements rose thin against the coming dark. has not yet come. Chapter 5, The Whispered Thing. The moon came up thin and white over the ridgeline, and Caleb Reyes found Nayeli where he knew she would be, on the flat stone above the horse meadow, where the grass ran silver in the wind, and a man could see the whole valley breathing below him. She did not turn when he climbed up beside her. She had heard him 100 yards back. She always did. "You walk like a white man again," she said. "Loud, you forget your feet when your head is full." "My head is full," he admitted and sat. For a while neither of them spoke. The fires of the camp glowed far below, small and steady, and somewhere a dog barked once and gave it up. The air smelled of cold water and sage and the faint sweetness of the grass the horses had cropped that day. Caleb had ridden this valley since he was a boy of 9, half-starved and hollow-eyed, carried in on Dieta's own saddle. He knew its every fold. And yet tonight it felt new to him, sharpened, the way the world sharpens when a man knows he is about to say a thing he cannot take back. "You did well," she said at last. "With the horses, my father saw, he does not say it, but he saw. Your brother saw too. He didn't like it any better for my doing well." Nayeli's mouth curved. "Tahoma does not like the sun for rising. Do not measure yourself against my brother's liking. You would starve." Caleb laughed low, and the sound surprised him because his chest had been tight as a drawn cinch all the ride up. He looked at her, the strong line of her jaw, the way the moon caught the silver in her hair ties, the calm in her that he had never once seen him break. He had spent 4 seasons pretending he did not look at her like this. He was tired of pretending, tired down to the bone. "Nayeli." Something in the way he said her name made her turn. She studied him the way she studied a lame horse or a fevered child, direct, unhurried, seeing more than a person wished to show. "Say it," she said quietly. "Whatever it is that made your feet forget themselves, say it before it eats you." He looked out at the valley so he would not lose his nerve to her eyes. "When I was a boy," he said, "your father pulled me off a dying mule and put me on his own horse and rode 2 days to bring me here. I remember thinking this is a dream, and when it ends I'll be alone in the dark again. I've been waiting most of my life for the dream to end. Every good thing I'm waiting for someone to come take it back and tell me it was never mine to keep. The ranch, this valley, your people." He swallowed. "You." The wind moved the grass. She said nothing, and her silence was not her father's silence which pressed a man down. Hers made room. "I don't have the right to want you," Caleb went on, rougher now. "I know it. I'm the one your people kept, and I'm the one my own kind spits at for being kept. I've got no clean place to stand and offer a woman anything, but I'm past being able to sit across a fire from you and act like my heart's not doing what it's doing." He made himself turn and face her. "If your father would allow it, if there were any way under this moon that he would allow it, I would speak the words, the bond words. I would say them to you, and mean everyone until I'm in the ground." He had never said the sacred thing aloud, not in all his years among them. The words for the bond were not spoken lightly. A man carried them a long time before he was permitted to lay them down at a woman's feet. To even name that he would speak them was to step to the very edge of a cliff. Nayeli's breath caught. He heard it, a small, sharp sound in the quiet. "You know what you are saying," she whispered. "You of all the whites know what those words weigh. You did not learn them at a mission. You learned them at our fire." "I know exactly what they weigh." His voice cracked and he let it. "That's why I've carried them 4 years without setting them down." For a long moment she only looked at him, and he watched something in her face come loose. Some guard she had held even longer than he had held his silence. When she spoke, her voice was not steady, and Nayeli's voice was always steady. "The day of the horse breaking," she said. "The gray mare that no one could gentle. You did not fight her. You stood in the middle of the corral in the dust, and you waited, and you spoke to her low in our tongue, and you let her come to you in her own time." Nayeli's eyes were bright. "I stood at the rail and I thought there, that is a man who knows the difference between taking and being given to. I have watched every man in 3 bands and none of them knew that difference. You knew it. A white man knew it." She shook her head slowly, wondering at it still. "I have loved you since that day, Caleb Reyes. I have been more angry about it than you can dream, but I have loved you since that day." The valley tilted under him. He had come up this ridge braced for grief, for her kindness, her refusal, the gentle closing of a door. He had not once let himself imagine this. "Nayeli." "Do not touch me yet." She said it not coldly but carefully, and he stopped, his hand halfway to her. "If you touch me now I will forget what must be done, and I am my father's daughter. It must be done rightly or not at all." "Then tell me how it's done right." he would have crawled the length of the valley on his hands. I'll do it however it's done. We do not run. Her chin came up, and there was the chief's blood in her, iron under the softness. I have heard the stories of your kind, the man who steals the daughter and rides for the border in the night. That is a coward's love, and it shames the woman and breaks the father and leaves the children with no people at all. We will not do that. I would sooner never have you than have you that way. I never wanted you that way. His throat was thick. I want to stand in the light and have him give you to me. I want it to be true, not stolen. I've had enough of my whole life feeling like something I sneaked off with and might have to give back. Her face gentled then, all the way, and it undid him. Then we go to my father, she said. Together, tomorrow before the council of the elders in the open, we ask his blessing, and whatever he says, her voice steadied itself with visible effort. Whatever he says, we abide by it as his children. That is the price of doing it rightly. He may say no. He may say no, Caleb agreed. The words cost him, but he made them true. And I'll take it standing up if he does. He may say yes. Don't, he laughed unsteady. Don't let me hope it. I've been hoping quiet for 4 years, and it near killed me. Let me hope out loud for one night then, just tonight. She let him. That was the mercy of her. She did not guard herself against joy the way lesser people did. She reached out, finally, and laid her hand flat against his chest over his hammering heart, not to pull him in, only to feel it. And he covered her hand with his, and they sat like that above the silver valley, two people who had waited a long time to stop pretending, while the fires burned low below them and the moon climbed and the horses moved soft in the dark. Say a little of it, she murmured. Not the whole vow, not before my father, but a little. So I know how it will sound. He bent his head close to hers. He gave her a fragment, the opening breath of the bond words, spoken so low it was hardly sound at all, the first whisper of the thing no man of his blood had ever been permitted to say to a woman of hers. Her eyes closed. When he finished the small piece of it, her lashes were wet, and she did not open her eyes for a moment, holding it. Yes, she breathed. Like that, say the rest of it in front of everyone one day, say it in the light. I will, he said. I swear it on your father's horse that carried me in. She laughed then, wet and helpless, and pressed her forehead to his shoulder. And for the space of that laugh, the two worlds that had torn at him, his whole life, were not two worlds at all. They were one fire, and he was warm at the center of it, and there was no dark edge waiting. They came down at dawn, apart decorous, and it fooled no one. Old women looked up from the cook fires and hid their smiles behind their hands. A boy leading the horses to water stopped dead and stared, then whooped and ran to tell it. By the time the sun cleared the ridge, the camp seemed to lean toward the two of them, hopeful, as if the whole band had been holding a breath along with them and had only now let it out. Dieta received them outside his lodge with the elders gathered, as custom asked. Caleb stood beside Naeli in the morning light and spoke plainly, without cleverness, the way the chief had taught him a man should speak when he meant a thing. He asked for the blessing. He did not hide what he was or where his blood came from. He laid it all in the open. For a long while Dieta said nothing, and every soul there felt the weight of it. His eyes moved from Caleb to his daughter and back, reading them both. When he spoke, his voice carried to the edges of the crowd. I found you a dying child, Dieta said, and I did not save you to make you a bridge for others to walk across. I saved you because a child was dying. What you have become, you became by your own feet. He paused. My daughter is not a gift I hand across a fire to settle a debt. If she is given, it is because a man has shown the whole people in the open that his loyalty is not thinner than his blood. Tell me how to show it, Caleb said. I'll show it. The land council comes at the next moon. The chief's gaze was level and hard as a riverbed stone. Crane and his kind will stand and speak against our water. You will stand with us. Openly, before your own people and mine, with your name on it, where every white man in the territory will see the one they call the kept one choose us. Do that, stand where it costs you everything, and do not flinch, and you will have my blessing, and my daughter, and my son for a brother, whether he likes it or not. A murmur moved through the elders. Fail or turn or speak soft to save yourself, and you will have nothing, and you will have earned nothing. I'll stand, Caleb said. You won't have to look for me. I'll be right there where you can see me. Naeli's hand found his for half a heartbeat, hidden by the fold of her dress, and squeezed and let go. Dieta almost smiled. It moved under his face and did not quite surface, but it was there, and the whole camp saw it and lifted with it. For one bright morning, it seemed the impossible thing might actually hold, that the two worlds might lie down together after all, and a man with no clean place to stand might finally be given one. Caleb rode home to his ranch that afternoon lighter than he had been in years, already turning over in his mind the words he would say at the council, not knowing that Silas Crane had learned everything, the blessing, the condition, the whole tender shape of the thing, and had already sent a rider south for a set of papers that had never been true, and had begun, smiling, to build the trap. Chapter 6, The Weight of Blood. Caleb rode home the long way, the way a man takes when he does not want the road to end because he does not know what he will find when it does. The council fire was 2 hours behind him now, but he could still see it, the faces of the people who had raised him lit orange and doubting, the forged papers passing hand to hand, Dieta's silence gone hard as flint. He had stood before them with the truth in his mouth and watched it fail to land. That was the part that would not leave him, not the accusation. The way the truth had simply slid off, like rain off oiled hide, because Silas Crane's ink had said otherwise, and Silas Crane's ink was white man's ink, and Caleb at the bottom of it all was a white man's son. He had believed for a long time that a man was made of what he chose. He was learning tonight that a man was also made of what others chose to see. The ranch came up gray in the starlight, the low house and the pole corral and the scatter of horses that were the whole of what he owned in the world. He turned his gelding loose and stood a while at the fence with his arms crossed on the top rail, saying nothing, and the horses came to him one by one the way they always did, and that was something. That was almost enough. "You look like a man who buried somebody," said a voice from the porch. Old Marta sat in the dark with a shawl over her shoulders and a cold cup of coffee going colder in her hands. She had a way of being where she was needed before a man knew he needed her. Her husband had ridden for Caleb 3 seasons before the fever took him, and she had stayed on, because she said a widow needed something to do, and Caleb needed somebody to tell him when he was being a fool. "Buried something," Caleb said. "Not somebody, not yet." The council went bad. Crane had papers. Deed of sale, my name on it, or a good enough copy of it, selling the creek rights out from under the tribe to his outfit. He shook his head slowly. "Signed and witnessed and sworn, I've never seen the thing before in my life, and it near ended mine tonight all the same." Marta was quiet a moment, and they believed it. "Enough of them?" He looked out at the dark shapes of the mountains at the notch where the Apache camp lay unseen. Dieta suspended the blessing. Tahoma looked at me like he'd known all along I'd turn, and Nayeli, he stopped. The name still cost him something to say. Nayeli stood up in front of her own people and said it was a lie, in front of her father, in front of her brother. "She spent something tonight she can't get back, and she spent it on me." "Good woman. Too good to be spending it that way." Marta set the cup down on the boards with a small final click. "Then you'd best give her something worth what she spent," she said. "You didn't sign that paper. That means somebody signed it for you. That means somewhere there's a hand that held the pen and a mouth that swore the lie, and men like that don't do it for love. They do it for money, and money leaves tracks." Caleb turned from the fence. In the starlight his face had changed, the grief still there, but under it now something older and harder, the thing the Apache had put in him when he was a boy too small to lift a bow, that a man who has been struck does not weep about the striking. He hunts the fist. "The clerk," he said. "In town, every deed that gets sworn goes through Holly's at the land office. Holly's owes half the saloon and drinks the other half." "A man who owes and drinks," Caleb said, "is a man Crane could buy for the price of a bad afternoon." He came up the porch steps. "I'll ride in tomorrow." "You'll ride in tomorrow to a town that's already heard you sold out the savages who raised you." Marta stood, gathering her shawl. "They'll love you 2 ways at once, Caleb, traitor to the Indians and thick with them besides. There's no side of that street that's safe for you." "There never was," he said. "I stopped waiting on safe a long time ago." At the camp, Nayeli did not sleep. She sat in her father's wickiup with her back straight and her hands still in her lap, because a chief's daughter did not fidget even when her heart was a horse fighting the rope. Across the low fire, Dieta worked a strip of rawhide between his fingers, unhurried, the way he did everything, and Tahoma stood by the door flap with his arms folded and would not sit. "You shamed yourself tonight," Tahoma said at last, standing for him in front of everyone. "I stood for the truth," Nayeli said. "If that shames me, then I'm glad to be shamed, and you should be ashamed to say so." "The paper had his name. The paper had ink. You have known him since you were boys. You wrestled him in the dust of this very camp. And you would take the word of Silas Crane's ink over the whole of a life you watched with your own eyes. She turned to her father. You raised him. You pulled him half dead out of the wash, and you fed him from your own hand, and you taught him to speak so that even now he dreams in our tongue and not his mother's. And one paper undoes all of that. One paper, and he is a white man again, a stranger, a thief. Dieta did not look up from the rawhide. One paper does not undo it, he said. His voice was low and even and terrible in its calm. But it does not need to undo it. It only needs to make the people afraid. And a frightened people will listen to their fear before they listen to their memory. That is what Crane bought with his ink, not my belief. Their fear. Then tell them, Naomi said. You are the chief, tell them it is a lie. If I stand for him and I am wrong, Dieta said, I spend the trust of my people on a man whose blood is not ours, and if he betrays us after, there is nothing left of me to hold them together when Crane comes for the water. And Crane will come for the water. He set the rawhide down. For the first time he looked at his daughter, and there was grief in it, an old man's grief for choices that had no clean side. I love him too, Naomi. That is why I cannot afford to be a fool about him. A chief does not have the luxury of his own heart. Naomi rose. Then I will have it for both of us, she said, and went out into the cold. Tahoma watched her go. He said nothing to his father. But some time before dawn, he took his horse and rode down out of the mountains alone, and he did not tell anyone where. Caleb smelled the smoke before he saw it. He had ridden out at first light to check the north range, where the grass ran thin against the rimrock, and the wind brought it to him wrong, not the clean smoke of a hearth, but the fat black stink of burning brush and burning hide. He put his heels to the gelding and came over the rise at a dead run and pulled up hard. The north pasture was a field of ash. They had fired it in the night, upwind, and let it run through the dry grass and the mesquite until it burned itself out against the rock. 3 of his horses lay in the black dead of the smoke, their legs folded under them like they had only lain down to rest. The fence was a line of charred posts. On the last standing post, someone had tied a strip of red cloth, so there would be no mistaking it for accident, no lie a man could tell himself about lightning or carelessness. It was a message, and the message was signed. Caleb sat his horse in the ruin of it for a long time. Everything the Apache had put in him rose up at once and told him what to do. He knew where Crane's line camp was. He knew Boone slept there half the nights. He knew he could ride in low through the arroyo and be among them before a dog barked, and part of him, the boy who had learned that a wrong unanswered is a door left open, wanted it so badly his hands shook on the reins. He got down instead. He walked among the dead horses, and he closed what was left of their eyes with his palm, one after another, and he spoke to them low in Apache, the words for a good journey, the words Dieta had taught him for the dying. Then he set to the slow work of dragging the fallen posts clear so the living stock would not cut themselves on the char. He did not know he was watched. Up on the rimrock, belly down in the rocks where he had lain since before light, Tahoma looked down at the white man who had every reason and every right to ride out for blood, and who was instead burying horses and mending fence and swallowing the whole of the wrong without so much as a fist raised toward the men who had done it. Tahoma had come down the mountain half hoping to catch him at something, riding to Crane, taking coin, proving the paper true. He had found this instead. A man alone in a burned field, grieving animals, keeping his hands from the thing his hands wanted, because somewhere he had decided that being wronged did not make a man free to become the thing that wronged him. Tahoma lay in the rocks a long while after Caleb had gone. When he finally rose, he did not go down, but something in him had shifted, quiet as a stone settling, and it did not shift back. By the time Caleb reached town, the light was going amber and long. The land office sat at the end of the street with its shade drawn, but the door gave when he tried it, and Holly's was inside at his high desk with a bottle at his elbow and the look of a man who had been drinking to keep from thinking. He came half out of his chair when he saw who it was. I got nothing to say to you, Rays. You've got everything to say to me, Caleb said, and shut the door behind him and set his back against it. A deed got sworn in this office with my name on it. I never set foot in here to sign it. Somebody did the signing and somebody swore it true, and there's only one man in this territory whose seal makes it law. He crossed the room slow. That's you, Hollies. The clerk's throat worked. I don't, he said. It was already agreed. He said you'd made your mark elsewhere, and this was just the... Crane. The name fell out of Holly's like a tooth. "I got debts," he whispered. "You don't know what he's like. He said nobody'd ever question it. He said the Indians can't read it and you'd never." He stopped, gone white. "You kept the draft," Caleb said. It was not a question. He had watched men lie his whole life from both sides of every fence, and he knew the particular stillness of a man sitting on the truth. "A clerk always keeps the draft. Your own neck, where is it?" For a long moment Hollis did not move. Then his hand crept to a drawer and he drew out a folded paper, creased and smudged, and held it a moment as though it were the last plank between him and deep water. "This buries him," he said hoarsely. "You understand that? And if he learns I gave it." "He won't learn it from me." Caleb took the paper. He read it in the failing light, the false deed in draft, and beneath it, in Hollis's own cramped hand, the ledger note of the sum Crane had paid to have it sworn. A hand that held the pen. A mouth that swore the lie. Money that left tracks, just as Marta had said. It was enough. It was everything. He folded it into his coat against his heart and felt, for the first time since the council fire, that the ground under him was solid. He did not see the man at the alley window across the street. He did not see Boone step back from the glass, slow and unhurried, and turn his horse toward the hills where Crane was waiting, carrying the one piece of news that could not be allowed to reach the council alive. Chapter 7, Closing the Trap. The paper did not look like much. A single folded sheet, soft at the creases from riding in Caleb's coat, the ink of the county clerk's own hand run a little where a thumb had smudged it. But when Caleb laid it on the plank table in the town's meeting hall and set the bribed receipt beside it, the men who had spat at his shadow for a month went very quiet. "That is Crane's mark," said the clerk, a thin young man named Prout who had not slept well in weeks and looked it. He stood because old Marta had made him stand, one hand on his elbow like a mother steering a boy to church. "He paid me $9 to file the false deed and swear the water sale was signed. There was no signing. The Apache never sold a drop. I did it, and I am ashamed of it, and there it is." For a moment no one spoke. The land agent turned the forged deed toward the lamp and back, as if the truth might read different from another angle. It did not. "You could be lying now," said a rancher near the door, but he said it without heart. "He could," Caleb agreed. He kept his voice level, the way Dieta had taught him a lifetime ago, that a man who has been wronged and shouts sounds no different than a man who is guilty and shouts. "But the ledger doesn't lie, and Marta's got the freight man who carried Crane's money, and you've all seen my range since he burned it. Ask yourselves who profits. It was never me. I never wanted your creek or theirs. I wanted to be left to my horses." Marta folded her arms. "And you know it," she said to the room, to all of them, the widow who had buried a husband on this soil and earned the right to scold every man in it. "You know it because you've watched this boy trade fair for 10 years while you called him names behind his back and bought his geldings to your faces." The rancher by the door looked at his boots. It was not forgiveness. Caleb knew the difference. Men did not unlearn a season of suspicion in an evening, and when the agent finally said, "Lo, this changes the filing, Crane's claims got no legs," there was no cheer, only the shuffle of chairs and the slow, grudging arithmetic of men rebuilding what they thought they had known. One of them, a stockman named Hollis who had bought 2 horses off Caleb the spring past and cut him dead in the street ever since, cleared his throat. "I said things," he offered, not quite looking up. "About your grass burning, said maybe you had it coming." "You did say it," Caleb answered. He did not soften it and he did not sharpen it. "I heard about it. I'd take a hand mending fence better than an apology, if you're offering either." Hollis nodded slowly, and that was the whole of it, and somehow it was more than a speech would have been. But the deed was dead. That was enough. That was the trap he had come to spring, and it had closed. He rode for the camp before the lamps were snuffed. He found the tribal council still sitting when he came up the wash in the last blue of dusk, and he did not wait to be summoned. He walked to the fire with the same papers in his hand and laid the whole of it before Dieta, the forgery, the clerk's confession, the freight man's mark, and he told it plain, the way he had told the whites, sparing himself nothing and Crane nothing. Tahoma stood across the fire with his arms crossed and his face shut like a door. But he listened. When Caleb finished, it was the old chief who spoke first, and he spoke slowly, weighing each stone before he set it down. "When the council doubted you," Dieta said, "I did not speak for you, I let the doubt stand." His dark eyes did not leave Caleb's. "That was not cruelty. A man's worth is not proven by the friends who shout, but by whether the truth still walks to him when the shouting stops." He looked at the papers in the firelight. The truth has walked to you, I see it. Some of it walked, Tahoma said. It was not an attack. It was closer to honesty than Caleb had ever gotten from him. The whites lied, he unlied it, that is a thing. He unfolded his arms at last. It is not nothing, that a man rides into the mouth of his own people and makes them eat their words. No, Dieter agreed, it is not nothing. Something eased in the circle then, not all the way, but enough that Caleb felt the breath he had been holding since the land council go out of him. The elders murmured. A woman put more wood on the fire. And Dieter arose, which he did not do lightly any more, and set his hand flat against Caleb's chest over the papers and the heart both. The blessing I gave and then held, the chief said, quiet enough that it was for Caleb and not the circle, is not lost. It is waiting. There is one more proving, and I think you know already it will not be a thing of paper. His mouth moved, not quite a smile. Rest tonight. You have earned a fire. She was waiting for him past the horse line, where the picket ponies made a soft wall of warmth against the coming night. And when she stepped out of the dark, he forgot every measured word he had made himself keep in town. Nayeli. I heard, she said. Her voice was not steady, and she did not try to make it so. I heard you stood in front of them all, the ones who burned your grass and made them small. My brother told it like a war story. She came close. In the low light he could see that she had been near to weeping and had not let herself, which was so entirely her that his chest ached. I never believed the lie, not for a breath. I want you to know that I fought my own father over you, and I would do it again. I know it. He caught her hand, cold from the evening, and folded it in both of his the way he had over the creek water a season ago, a lifetime ago. It's what carried me. Every night I thought I'd lost the right to belong anywhere. I thought, she still knows me. If one person still knows the shape of me true, I'm not gone. You are not gone, she pressed her forehead to his knuckles. You are the least gone man I have ever known. You keep coming back. From the wound, from the burning, from the doubt, you keep coming back. She lifted her face. Do not make a habit of nearly losing everything, Caleb. My heart cannot ride that trail with you many more times. Then I'll keep it, he said. Your father says one more proving and the bond may be spoken. I'll give him 100 provings. I'll give him the rest of my life proving it. He does not need 100. Her fingers curled into his. He needs to see once that when the fire comes you will not run to the white world to save yourself. That is the thing he watches for, not because he doubts your heart, because he has buried men who chose wrong when it cost them. I won't choose wrong. I know. She said it like a vow of her own, and for a moment the two worlds that had spent his whole life pulling him in half went still and quiet, and let him stand in one place, holding her at peace. It could not last, it never lasted. It broke as these things break, somewhere else in the low country where Sila's crane sat his horse and looked at a dead thing he had made himself. The deed was gone, the clerk had turned. The town, that spineless jury of debt and grievance he had thought he owned, was already whispering his name the way it had whispered the ranchers. Crane understood with the cold clarity of a man who has staked all his standing on a bluff and seen it called, that the legal road was shut to him now for good. There would be no clean taking, no paper to hide behind. Then we take it dirty, he told Boone, and he was surprised how easy the words came, how little they cost him now that everything else was already lost. No more filings, no more surveyors, you've been itching to earn your keep. Earn it? Boone smiled the way a knife smiles. The whole camp. The camp will bend if you take the right piece of it. Crane turned his horse toward the ridge, toward the far smoke of the Apache fires. That old man loves one thing more than his water. Bring me the thing he loves, and he'll sign the land away himself and thank me for the pen. Scout it, find where they're soft. And Boone, who had a gift for finding where things were soft, took 4 men up into the rocks above the gathering grounds the next gray morning and lay on his belly in the sage, and watched the healer women come out to cut yucca and gather the low green medicine plants at the base of the wash. Unarmed, unguarded, their voices carrying up bright and unworried on the cold air. And in the middle of them, sleeves pushed back, a basket on her hip and her black hair loose, the chief's own daughter. Boone smiled again. He had found where they were soft. Caleb was mending the picket rope when Tahoma found him, and he knew from the warrior's face before a word crossed it that peace had run out. There is sign in the rocks above the gathering ground, Tahoma said. He did not waste breath on how they had come to be talking as men who trusted each other. That had happened in the night and neither would name it. Shod horses, white men's horses, 4, maybe 5, lying up where a hunter lies to watch a water hole. His jaw worked. The women went down to gather at dawn. The medicine women, my sister is with them. The rope fell out of Caleb's hands. Crane, he said, he can't win it clean, so we'll take a hostage and make Dieta pay the ransom and land. He was already moving, already dragging the saddle off the rail and onto the bay, and Tahoma was already up on his own paint, and the two of them wheeled toward the wash with the same thought running between them like a struck spark. He wants her because your father can't say no to losing her. God, Tahoma, they'll take her. Ride, Tahoma said, and there was nothing of the old distrust left in it, only a brother's fear. Ride, and I will follow, and if they have touched her, I will show these white raiders what my people are when they are pushed to the wall. They rode. They rode down the wash and through the sage with the cold morning tearing at them. Two men from two worlds bent low over their horses' necks, and Caleb shouted her name into the wind, though she was too far to hear it. Shouted it the way a man shouts against a thing he already fears is done. They came over the last rise together. The gathering ground lay open below them in the flat gray light, the sage trampled, the low green plants scattered where baskets had been dropped and abandoned. Three of the healer women knelt in the dirt, one keening, one with her hand pressed to a cut on her scalp where a rifle butt had opened it. The others huddled around them. Their voices came up thin and broken. Caleb was off the bay before it stopped, sliding down into the trampled ground, going from woman to woman, and he did not need to ask because their faces answered him, and the empty basket lying on its side answered him, and the churned earth where 5 shod horses had wheeled and driven away hard to the south answered him loudest of all. Naeli was not there. The keening woman looked up at him, and at Tahoma coming down behind, and she said the word none of them could bear. The word Crane had built his whole ruin to make her say. They took her, she wept. The white men, they took her. Chapter 8, The Longest Night. The fire in the center of the camp had never looked so small. Caleb stood at the edge of its light and felt the whole night pressing in around it, black and endless, the way the desert closed over a lamp the moment you carried it out past the last wall. Men and women moved through the dark with torches, calling Naeli's name into places they already knew were empty. The healer women had come back with their gathering baskets torn and their voices gone. One of them had a cut above her eye where a raider's quirt had opened it. She had not stopped shaking since she'd told them what she saw, the men on the ridge, the horses coming down fast, and Naeli stepping in front of the younger girls so they could run. Of course she had. Caleb had known her long enough now to know she would stand between danger and anyone smaller than herself, the same as she'd stood between him and her brother's contempt more than once. It was the thing he loved most in her. Tonight it had cost her everything. You brought this. He turned. A man he half knew, Nanton, a cousin of Tahoma's, broad through the shoulders and older than Caleb by a decade, stood a few paces off with his jaw set hard. Nanton, Caleb said quietly. You brought this to us? The man's voice cracked, and that was worse than if he had shouted. Since you came back to us grown, since you traded your horses and made your soft eyes at the chief's daughter, the white men have circled closer. They smell you on us. They think if one of them can walk into our camp, all of them can. He took a step. Your blood called them here. Around the fire, other faces turned. Not all of them angry, but enough. Enough that Caleb felt the old cold open in his chest, the cold he had carried since he was a boy, the one that whispered you belong to no one, you are a guest in every house, the door behind you is never truly yours. He had spent his whole grown life trying to close that door and stand inside it. Tonight, with Naeli gone and her people looking at him like a stain, it blew wide open again. He did not defend himself. There was nothing in him that wanted to. If his blood had brought this, then let them say so. He would carry that too. Enough. The word came low and did not rise, but every head turned to it. Chief Dieta came into the firelight, and Caleb saw with a jolt what the last hours had done to him. The chief had always seemed to Caleb like something the country itself had made, weathered, unhurried, harder than the men around him. Now he looked old. His daughter was gone, and it had aged him a season in an evening. But his eyes, when they found Nanton, had lost none of their weight. You would spend this night hunting a man who stands in our own fire, Dieta said, when the ones who took her ride farther with every word out of your mouth. He let that settle. Caleb's blood did not take my daughter. Sela's Crane took my daughter. The name dropped into the quiet like a stone into a well. You know this, Nanton said. You know it, and yet. I know it because Crane wishes me to know it. Dieta's voice was iron and grief together. He does not want her. A girl is nothing to a man like that. He wants our water and our ground, and he has learned he cannot take it with paper. So now he takes it another way. He holds what we love over the fire and tells us to choose, leave the land our mothers are buried in, or fight him and be broken, or watch him break her. His jaw worked. That is the trap. It has 3 teeth, and every one of them closes on us. Caleb spoke for the first time since Nanton had come at him. Then we take away his hold. Every eye came to him. He thinks he's holding a knife to the tribe, Caleb said. He's counting on you being careful. He's counting on Dieta weighing a whole people against one daughter and choosing the people the way a chief has to. He looked at the old man, and something passed between them, hard and honest. He's not counting on me. I'm not the chief. I don't have a people to weigh. I've got 1 ranch, 40 horses, and a name nobody on either side wants. I can spend all of it on her, and it costs this tribe nothing. You would go alone into Crane's men, Dieta said. It was not quite a question. If I have to, Caleb heard how flat his own voice was. He had never said anything he meant more. I'll ride in under whatever flag they'll honor. I'll put the deed to my land in Crane's hand if that's what buys me through the gate. And past the gate, he stopped. Past the gate he had no plan yet, only the certainty, bone-deep and simple as sunrise, that he would not come back out of that camp without her or not come back at all. Past the gate I'll do what I have to. That is not a plan, Nanton said, but the heat had gone out of him. That is a man throwing himself off a cliff and calling it flying. Maybe, Caleb didn't look away from him, but it's mine to throw. 40 miles south and west, in a low camp tucked into a box canyon Crane's raiders had made their own. Nayeli sat with her back straight against a wagon wheel and refused to be afraid where they could see it. They had bound her wrists with a rope a child could have picked because they thought a woman was already broken by being taken. She had let them think it. She had gone limp when they threw her over the horse and wept a little at the right moment, and all the while she had been counting men, horses, water, the way the canyon narrowed at its mouth, the guard who drank and the 2 who didn't. A healer learned to see what was wrong with a thing quickly. She was reading this camp the way she read a fever. Boone crouched down in front of her, turning a knife over in his hands so the firelight ran along it. He was younger than she'd expected and worse for it, a cruelty that hadn't yet learned to hide itself. You're a quiet one, he said. Chief's girl, figured you'd scream more. You would like that, Nayeli said in his own tongue, clear as creek water, and had the pleasure of watching surprise move across his face. You brought me here to be a scream, to carry back to my father so he hears it in his sleep. I will not give you the sound to carry. Boone recovered, grinned. You'll give plenty by dawn. Your daddy's got a choice to make, and whichever way he jumps, you're the coin that pays for it. No, she held his eyes. She would not let them drop. I am not a coin. A coin does not choose. I have chosen. Whatever my father does, I have already decided I am worth less than my people's water, and so you are holding nothing. She leaned forward until the rope pulled taut. You have taken a woman who is not afraid to die and called it leverage. You have made a very bad trade, and you are too young to know it yet. Something flickered behind Boone's eyes, not shame, he had none, but a dog's uncertainty when the thing it cornered doesn't cower. He stood up too fast. We'll see how brave you talk come sunup, he said, and walked off toward the fire. Nayeli let out a breath, slow, and closed her eyes only for a moment. Come sunup. That was the clock then. She had until sunup. She began quietly, patiently, to work the poorly tied rope against the iron rim of the wheel behind her, and she thought about Caleb Ray's not to be rescued by him. She would not sit and wait to be some man's saved thing, but because she knew him. She knew the ranch was all he had, and she knew, with a certainty that frightened her more than Boone's knife, that he would come and lay it down. She only meant to be on her own feet when he arrived, so they could walk out side by side, the way they did everything. Tahoma found Caleb at the horse line, cinching his saddle in the dark. For a long moment the warrior said nothing. He and Caleb had spent years circling each other, Tahoma seeing white skin and remembering every wrong that skin had done his people. Caleb answering the suspicion, again and again, with nothing but patience. On the ride to recover the stolen horses, something had cracked between them, though it had not yet healed into anything with a name. You mean to do this thing? Tahoma said at last. I do. Alone. If I have to. Tahoma stepped into the starlight. He had his war shirt on. His face, that Caleb had watched harden against him for 2 years, was open now in a way Caleb had never seen it, and there was something in it close to grief and close to shame. "When we found you," Tahoma said slowly, "I was a boy. I watched my father lift a half-dead white child out of the wash and carry him home, and I hated it. I have hated it a long time. I told myself your blood was a debt we would one day be made to pay." His throat moved. "Tonight I thought it had come due. I stood at the fire, and part of me wanted to blame you, the way Nanton blamed you, because it is easier to hate the guest than to admit the enemy is stronger than we are." Caleb said nothing. He had learned from Dieta that some words you did not step on while a man was still laying them down. "But I have watched you," Tahoma went on. "I watched you take my anger and not give it back. I watched you bleed rather than lift your hand against men who wronged you because you would not spend our name on a fight. And now my sister is gone, and there is one man in this whole country ready to trade his life for hers before the chief has even finished grieving, and that man is the white boy my father carried home." He shook his head, and something in it broke open. "You are not going alone." Caleb turned fully to face him. "Say it," Tahoma said, "the word your people and mine both use for it." "Say what we are." "Brothers," Caleb said, and the word came out rough, because he had waited his whole life to be given it by this man and had stopped believing he ever would. "Brothers," Tahoma gripped his forearm hard, warrior to warrior. "Then we ride together and we bring her home, and I will never again let any man at that fire name your blood as the thing that failed us. Your blood is going into Crane's camp for her. That answers everything they could ask." For a moment in the dark by the horses, the two worlds that had pulled at Caleb his whole life stopped pulling apart. They stood for once in the same place, facing the same night. It was the thing he had wanted since he was a boy with no house that was truly his, and he had gotten it in the worst hour of his life, and he understood then that this was how it always came, not gently, but forged. They did not have long to hold it. A rider came in from the south picket at a dead run, and behind him, tied to a lance he carried crosswise, fluttered a strip of white cloth, a raider's flag of message. He reined up at the edge of the firelight and threw something down into the dust before them all, a scrap of hide, and knotted into it a single strand of black hair bound with a bead Caleb had seen 100 times in Naeli's braid. Dieta came out of the crowd and knelt, and lifted it in both hands like it was made of glass. "He sends terms," the rider said, his voice shaking. "The white man Crane, the tribe's land signed over and the people gone from it by dawn, off the water, off the graves, all of it, or the girl does not come back." He swallowed. "He says the sun rises for us or for her, not both, and he starts counting when it clears the eastern rim." Caleb looked east. The night was at its deepest, its blackest, the hour when it seemed the light had left the world for good and would not be persuaded to return. But it would return. It always returned. And when it did, it would come up over that eastern rim whether they were ready or not and start Crane's clock. He put his boot in the stirrup. "Then we don't wait for it," he said. "We ride before the sun does." Chapter 9, The Vow and the Reckoning. The deed to the ranch weighed nothing in Caleb's hand, and that was the cruelest part of it. A single fold of paper, soft at the creases from being carried so long against his heart. 10 years of rising before the sun. Fence line he had sunk with his own back. All of it lay in that paper, and he meant to give it away before the sun was full up. "You do not have to do this," old Marta said. She held his coat while he checked the loads in his belt, and her hands were steady though her voice was not. "There is another way." "Not tonight, there isn't." He took the coat from her, did not put it on. "Crane wants the land or he wants a war. If I ride in offering him the one thing he's wanted more than the tribe's water, my ground, deeded clean, his name on it, he'll want to hear the rest before he kills me. That's all I need, for him to want to hear the rest." "And the girl?" Caleb looked east, toward the raiders' camp in the broken country where the mesas threw their long shadows. Somewhere in that dark Naeli was waiting, and he did not let himself imagine how. "I'm going to bring her home," he said, "or I'm not coming back either." Tahoma came up out of the arroyo without a sound, the way his people had taught them both, and for the first time in all the years Caleb had known him there was no wall behind the warrior's eyes, only the work ahead. "The men are in place," Tahoma said, 15. "We move when Crane's attention is on you and not on the ridge. When you have her, you put her behind you and you go down, flat to the ground. My arrows do not know your face in the dark, brother." The word landed in Caleb's chest and lodged there, warm as a coal. Brother. He had waited his whole life to hear it from this man and had stopped believing he ever would. Flat to the ground, Caleb repeated. I'll remember. Tahoma gripped his forearm the old way, hand to wrist. My sister chose you long before any of us allowed it. Whatever comes, she chose you first. Carry that in. Then he was gone into the dark, and Caleb rode down toward the fires alone. They took his rifle at the edge of camp, as he had known they would, and did not find the pistol in his boot. Caleb needed Crane to believe him for a handful of minutes, and belief was the only weapon he had bothered to bring. Boone met him between the fires, teeth pale in his beard. Well, he said, the half-savage comes calling, come to beg raise. Come to trade. Caleb held the deed up so the firelight caught it. My ranch, 400 acres, water on it, deeded and witnessed. Crane's name for the asking. That's worth more to him than a girl and a fight he'll hang for. Boone's eyes went to the paper the way a coyote's go to a lame calf. Greed made men stupid, and these were greedy men. He jerked his head, and Caleb walked in between the guns into the heart of the camp, counting as he went. 9 men he could see. The 10th would be on the girl. Silas Crane sat by the largest fire with a cup of coffee like a man at his own table, and when he saw the deed his whole face changed. That was the thing about Crane. He could burn a man's range and call it business, but show him land and he became a boy at a shop window. Raise, Crane set the cup down. I confess I did not expect sense from you. I want the girl unhurt, and I want your word my people are left alone. Caleb kept his voice low, weary, beaten, the voice of a man giving up. You get the ranch. You get your water rights uncontested. I sign it in front of your men so nobody can say I didn't. And I ride out of the territory and you never see my face again. Crane studied him a long moment. Show me she matters that little to you, and I'll believe every word. Bring her out, and I'll sign on her back if you want. They brought her out. Naomi came into the firelight with her chin high and her wrists bound before her, a bruise blooming along her cheekbone, and her eyes found Caleb's across the flames and held. She did not cry out. She did not sag with relief. She read him the way she read horses and weather and the intentions of men, and Caleb watched her understand in the space of one breath that the slump of his shoulders was a lie, that the paper in his hand was bait. He saw her decide to help him tell it. So, she said, cold as a well, you sold us after all. My brother said you would. My father defended you and you sold us for 400 acres. She spat into the fire. White blood runs true. Good girl, Caleb thought, and something in him nearly broke with love. She was buying him the seconds. She was drawing every eye to the little drama between them so no one watched the ridge. Untie her hands, Caleb said to Crane. A man doesn't sign away his home to a bound woman like she won something. Let her stand free while I do it. That much dignity. It was nothing. It was a small, vain-sounding thing, and Crane, who understood pride, waved his hand. Boone cut the cords at Naomi's wrists. Caleb stepped forward and laid the deed on the flat stone by the fire, and drew the stub of pencil from his pocket, and bent as if to sign. And up on the ridge, a night-bird called that was not a night-bird. He drove his shoulder into Naomi and put her behind him and dropped, both of them, flat to the cold ground, as the first arrows came whispering down out of the dark. It was not a battle. It was chaos with a shape only Tahoma understood. The raiders' fires had blinded them to the ridge, and the ridge had eyes that fire could not reach. Boone bellowed orders no one could follow. Horses tore their pickets. Caleb had the hidden pistol out of his boot and Naomi's hand in his, and they were up and running low between the wagons toward the black country where Tahoma's men would fold around them. Boone rose up out of the smoke with his gun already swinging, and Caleb shoved Naomi clear and took the shot meant for both of them. It went in below his ribs and turned the whole night white. He stayed on his feet somehow. He put 2 rounds into Boone at 4 paces and watched the man sit down in the dirt with an expression of enormous surprise, and then the pistol was too heavy to hold, and the ground was tilting up to meet him. No, Naomi had him under the arm, was dragging him, was stronger than any woman had a right to be. No, you do not get to do this. Walk. Walk * Caleb, on your feet. You are not carried out of here like a dead thing. Walk. He walked. He would have walked into the sea if she told him to in that voice. They found Crane trying to catch a horse. The cattle baron who had moved men and forged papers and burned a good man's range stood at the end of it fumbling a bridle onto a panicked animal. And when he saw them, Caleb bleeding, upright, and Tahoma's warriors coming out of the dark on every side with the calm of men whose work was nearly done. Sila's Crane understood that there was no version of the morning in which he was still a rich man. "It's finished, Crane," Caleb said. Blood was warm all down his side and his voice came thin, but it carried. "Marta's got the clerk. The real survey, the bribe ledger, the name of the man you paid to forge the water grant, all of it in front of the marshal by now and half the town besides. You didn't just come after the tribe. You forged territory paper. They'll hang you for that in front of the very settlers you thought you spoke for." Crane's mouth worked. "You've got nothing, a rancher's word and a squaw's." Tahoma moved, and Caleb caught his arm and held it bleeding with the last of what he had. "No," Caleb said quietly, "not like this. He goes to the rope in the light in front of everyone so no one can ever call it savage. That's the only way we win it." And Tahoma, who had spent years certain that Caleb's blood would betray them all, lowered his weapon and looked at the white man he had called brother, and nodded once, because this was the very thing he had never believed a white man capable of choosing. They left Crane for the marshal's men, already riding in behind Marta's lantern, and they turned toward home. Caleb got 100 yards before his legs stopped answering him. He went down onto his knees at the lip of a dry wash with the stars swinging overhead, and Naeli came down with him, gathered him against her, pressed her hand hard over the wound to hold his life inside him. "Stay," she said, "stay with me. My father's fires are close. I can see them, we are almost." "Naeli," her name was the steadiest thing he had left. He got his hand up, found her face, the bruise, the tears she would not let fall in front of anyone but him. "Listen, I have to say it now. If I wait, if your father grants it later in the light before everyone, that's how it should be, that's the honor of it. But those are the words for the people. I want you to have the words that are only yours, before anything, in case there isn't a later." "There is a later," fierce. "There is." "Then you'll hear them twice." He drew her down until his mouth was at her ear, and he spoke the vow he had carried unspoken since the day she outrode him at the horse breaking, and he had known, God help him, that he was ruined for any other life. He spoke it low in her own tongue first, the words no white man had ever dared say to a daughter of her people, the binding words, the words that made two into one hearth, one road, one grave. "I will walk in front of you against the wind. I will be the last to eat and the first to stand. Your people are my people, and I have no other. Where you are is the only country I will ever claim." And then again in his own tongue, so there would be no doubt in either world what he had chosen. "I claim you, not as a bridge, not as a way in. You, only you, all the rest of it can burn." For a moment Naeli did not move at all, and the desert was very quiet, and Caleb thought perhaps he had spent the last thing he had on words she could not answer. Then her hand tightened in his shirt, and she brought her forehead down to his, and she gave him back the vow, not the trembling near thing they had whispered under the stars a season ago, but the whole of it, spoken plain and certain, sealed. "You are mine," she said against his mouth. "I heard you claim me, and I answer it. I take you. My people are your people, and you have proven it in blood tonight, and no one, not my brother, not my father, not one voice among them, will ever again call you the boy who was only kept. You are the man who came into the dark for me and spoke the words. It is done. Do you hear me, Caleb? It is done." "It's done," he breathed, and smiled because it was, and because the pain had gone strange and far away, and because he had at last, at the very last, belonged to something entirely. Tahoma took Caleb's weight on one side and Naeli on the other, and between the two of them, between the two worlds, they carried him the last of the way. The camp came up out of the dark, all fires and voices, and hands reached for him, brown hands and pale ones both, all reaching for the same failing man. At the edge of the great fire, his legs finally quit for good, and he folded down into the trampled earth he had bled to keep. And the last thing he heard before the dark took him was Naeli's voice going up over the whole camp, no longer cold, no longer careful, cracked wide open at last. "Father," she cried. "Father, come, he is ours now." He spoke the words, "Come quickly, he is *ours." And Chief Dieta's tall shape rising against the flames, and the whole people turning, and then nothing at all but the warmth of her hand still gripping his, refusing, even into the dark, to let him go. Chapter 10, The Granting of the Bond. Caleb woke to the smell of cedar smoke and the sound of a woman singing low, and for a long while he could not tell whether he was a man or a boy again, whether the years had happened at all or whether he had only dreamed the ranch and the town and the long road between. Then the pain in his side reminded him. It came slow and deep, The way water comes into a dry creek, and with it came the rest, Boone's knife, the flag of parley, the deed traded away, Naeli's hands on his face in the dark. He opened his eyes. She was there, of course she was there. She sat cross-legged beside the pallet with a bowl in her lap, grinding something dark and fragrant with a small stone, and the morning light through the smoke hole caught the side of her face and made her look, for a moment, like something carved and permanent. "You slept 4 days," Naeli said without looking up. "You talked in your sleep in both tongues, you argued with a horse." "Did I win?" "No," she set the stone aside. "The horse had the better of the argument." He tried to laugh, and the laugh turned into something that made him grip the blanket. She was at his side in an instant, one hand flat against his chest, holding him still with a strength that had nothing gentle about it and everything tender. "Be still," she said. "You spent your blood like a fool who thought he had more of it than he did. My father says you have the sense of a yearling." "Your father," Caleb managed, "has said worse of me." "He has." She pressed a cool cloth to his brow, and her voice changed, lost its edge. "He has not left this place, Caleb. 4 days. He sits outside the lodge from dark to dark. Tahoma brings him food he does not eat." Caleb closed his eyes. He did not have the words for what that meant, so he let it be, the way he had learned as a boy to let the biggest things be, to carry them without naming them until they stopped being too heavy to lift. He healed slowly, and the whole camp healed with him. He learned the shape of it over the days that followed in pieces, from the ones who came to sit with him. Old Marta came twice, riding out from town on her dead husband's mule, and she told him the rest of it in her flat, dry way, the way she told everything. "Crane's finished," she said. "Not shot, not hanged, though there's plenty in town would have done either. The circuit judge came through. That proof you dug, the clerk's ledger, the bribe money, the forged marks it held in front of God and the whole valley." She worked a splinter of tobacco loose from her teeth. "Turns out folks don't much like being made fools of, even folks who never cared a lick for the Apache. Crane counted on their hate being bigger than their pride. Guessed wrong. And the waters deeded back the old boundary. The judge signed it and the marshal witnessed, and it's nailed to the mercantile wall where the water notice used to hang." She almost smiled. "Boone won't trouble anybody. He caught a bullet going out the door of that raider camp. Yours, some say. Tahoma's, others. Nobody's asking too hard." Caleb lay quiet a while. "My ranch," he said finally. "The deed, I traded it to Crane for the parley." "Void," Marta's eyes glinted. "Man can't hold what he got by fraud, and Crane's whole hand was fraud. Judge tore it up. The ranch is yours, Caleb Ray's, same as it ever was, which is to say, mortgaged to the eyebrows and half-burned in yours." She stood, joints cracking. "You want my opinion, you near died to buy back a girl and kept the ranch by accident. That's the luckiest fool's bargain I ever heard of. I didn't do it for the ranch." "I know that." She paused at the lodge flap, and for once the dryness left her. "The whole valley knows that. That's the thing that's changed, boy. That's the thing they can't take back." Tahoma came on the 6th day. He ducked into the lodge and stood a moment, awkward as all big men are in small spaces, and then he crouched by the pallet and looked at Caleb with an expression Caleb had never once seen on him, uncertain, almost shy. "You look bad," Tahoma said. "You've looked worse." "I have not." A ghost of a grin. It faded. Tahoma turned something over in his hands, a length of braided horsehair, black and gray worked together into a single cord. He laid it across Caleb's chest. "I made this. In the nights we waited to ride. I did not know if I made it for a burial or a—" He stopped. "For the other thing." Caleb touched the cord. Black hair and gray, 2 colors twisted so tight you could not find where one ended. "When we rode to their camp," Tahoma said slowly, "I told myself I rode for my sister. That was true. But there was another thing under it, and I will say it now so it is said. I rode beside you and I stopped counting your blood. I forgot to hold it against you. Somewhere in that dark I forgot, and I have not remembered since, and I do not wish to." He put his hand over Caleb's hand where it lay on the cord. "You are my brother. I was slow to it. I am ashamed of how slow. But you are my brother, and I will say it before the fire and before my father and before anyone who cares to hear." Caleb's throat closed. He had waited years for those words without ever letting himself want them, and now they were here and they undid him worse than the wound had. "Say it once more," Caleb said, rough, "so I know I didn't dream it." "Brother," Tahoma said. "There, now do not make me say it a 3rd time. I have a name to protect." They came for him at the end of 2 weeks. when he could stand and walk the length of the camp with a stick and only one hand pressed to his side. Naeli dressed the wound clean that morning, and then she was gone from the lodge, and other women came, her aunts and the healer grandmothers, and they moved around him with a purpose he did not understand until they brought him out into the light, and he saw the whole people gathered. They had built the fire high. The horses stood picketed and brushed until they shone, and at the center, upright in his robe, older than Caleb had ever let himself see him, stood Chief Dieta. The chief who had found a half-dead white boy in the brush and had not left him to die, who had raised him and let him go and doubted him again, because the trust of a people is not a thing given cheap. Dieta looked at Caleb across the fire for a long, long moment, and the whole camp held its breath with him. "I have been slow," Dieta said at last, and his voice carried. "Slower even than my son. I told this man his blood was not enough. I told him our trust was earned in seasons and in blood and not in the wanting of a good heart." He paused. "He earned it in seasons. He earned it in blood. He spent his own blood on the ground of our enemies for a daughter of this people and asked nothing and would have died asking nothing." The old man's jaw tightened. "I was wrong in only one thing. I said he lived between two worlds, as a man stands between two fires and belongs to neither. That was never true. This man does not stand between. He stands here. He has always stood here. I was too proud to see where his feet were planted." Dieta beckoned, and Naeli came forward. She wore white doeskin worked with beads the blue of deep water, and her hair was unbound, and she did not look shy or lowered as a bride in a story might. She looked straight at Caleb the way she had looked at him at the horse breaking on the first day, level and unafraid and a little amused, as though the whole ceremony were a race she already knew she'd win. "My daughter has chosen," Dieta said. "She chose long ago and told me so to my face, which is her way, and would not be moved, which is also her way." A murmur of warmth went through the people. "The bond between your two lives is a sacred thing. It is not spoken lightly, and it is not granted twice. I withheld it once when I was uncertain. I am no longer uncertain." He set one hand on Caleb's shoulder and one on his daughter's, and his hands were not steady, and he did not try to hide it. "Speak, then, both of you, speak the words, and let this whole people be your witness, and let no one of my blood or of his ever say again that they were not spoken true." Caleb took Naeli's hands. In the dark of the raiders' camp he had whispered the vow bleeding, half-conscious, certain he'd never live to say it in the light. Now the sun was on his face, and his people, both halves of them, all of them, stood watching, and his voice, when it came, did not shake. He spoke the words. The old words, the bond words, the ones no white man had ever been given leave to say. He spoke them slow and sure in the tongue he had learned before he'd learned his own name, and he watched them land in her eyes, and he watched her father's face, and he did not falter once. And Naeli answered him. She answered clear and strong so that the grandmothers at the back could hear, and when she finished there was no roar, no cheering, only a long exhalation from the whole camp at once, like the sound the wind makes coming down off the mountains at dusk, the sound of a thing that has been held a long time finally set down. Dieta bound their joined hands with the horsehair cord Tahoma had braided, black hair and gray, twisted so tight you could not find where one ended and the other began. Tahoma stepped up beside them and put one arm around his sister and one around Caleb and said, loud enough for the whole camp, "Brother," and this time it was not slow at all. They rode out at dawn, the two of them, the way people had begun to say they always did. The wound still pulled when Caleb sat the saddle, and it would leave a scar he'd carry the rest of his life, and he found he did not mind. Some things a man ought to be able to point to. Some things earn the right to be seen. The ranch lay ahead of them in the new light, the burned range already greening where the rains had come. The corrals mended by hands from both the town and the camp, settlers who'd changed their minds and Apache who'd changed theirs, working the same fence line, not friends yet, not quite, but no longer enemies, and that was a beginning, and beginnings were more than the valley had had in a long time. Old Marta's mule was already tied at the gate. The water ran clear in the reopened creek, down out of the mountains, past the boundary stone the judge had blessed, onto ground that would carry both their herds now, Apache ponies, and ranch stock watering side by side at the same slow bend of the same cold river. Naeli reined in on the rise and looked at it, and Caleb reined in beside her. "You had a whole world you could have had," she said, not quite a question. "The white world, your own kind, it would have been easier." "I know it." And you chose this. Caleb looked at her, at the woman who had outridden him on the first day and had been outriding him in the ways that mattered ever since. He thought of the boy in the brush who had belonged nowhere. He thought of the cord on their wrists. No, he said, I didn't choose it. I just quit pretending I'd ever wanted anything else. He nudged his horse forward, down toward the water and the mended fence and the whole green morning of it. Come on. Let's go home. And they rode down together into the light, and the ground took the weight of them both and held.